Hi, my name is Nathaniel Hatfield, and I am one of the lead behavior analysts at Pathways. This training was developed to provide information to parents and families about the fundamentals of applied behavior analysis and how ABA drives the services your children are receiving. This training is one of many Pathways is putting together for families and caregivers to help them get through these difficult and unprecedented times. Since this is our first ABA training, we want to start with the basics and provide some very general foundational knowledge that can be built upon with upcoming trainings. During this training, we will briefly discuss two main topics: principles of ABA and functions of behavior. Following this training, we encourage you to complete our survey to provide feedback. This will provide useful information on the direction we take for future trainings. So let's get started. What is ABA? A lot of people ask what ABA is, and there are common misconceptions. ABA is a science that is devoted to understanding and improving human behavior. Specifically, ABA focuses on improving socially significant behaviors. These behaviors directly impact the quality of life for the affected individual and their family. Some examples of socially significant behaviors would include communication skills, adaptive skills, social skills, reading, and teaching appropriate alternative behaviors in place of maladaptive, dangerous, or interfering behaviors. What sets ABA apart from other disciplines is the science behind it. Decisions we make regarding our students' programming, their interventions, and skill development are based on our use of scientific methods. These methods allow us to evaluate the effectiveness of our treatments and the improvements in behaviors. So to put it simply, ABA is a scientific approach for identifying variables in the environment that influence our students' behaviors and develop a plan to improve their behavior using those same variables. ABA therapy. There are many different techniques and teaching methods used in ABA, many of which you have probably heard us talk about in IEP meetings and our monthly parent meetings. Some examples of techniques that are used frequently are differential reinforcement, shaping, and behavior chaining. These techniques are used to accomplish many goals, including increase appropriate behavior, acquire and maintain new skills. A teaching method is how we provide instruction, and some examples used with our students are discrete trial, incidental teaching, and verbal behavior. Discrete trial training is probably the most well-known teaching method and is conducted within an intensive one-to-one teaching session. All of these techniques and teaching methods focus on what happens before and after the behavior. We use the terms antecedent when describing things that happen immediately before the behavior, and consequence when describing what happens immediately following the behavior. For example, in a teaching scenario, a teacher stating, "Write your name," is the antecedent. The student writing their name is the behavior, and the teacher stating, "Nice job," which is praise, would be the consequence. Principles of ABA. Principles of ABA explain how the behavior changes due to learning in the environment. For the purpose of this training, we are going to focus on the principles that explain in which way behavior changes, by either increasing behavior, known as reinforcement, and decreasing behavior, known as punishment. Reinforcement. Reinforcement is the most important principle and is a key element of most behavior change programs designed by behavior analysts. Reinforcement occurs when a behavior is followed by a change in the environment, similar behaviors occurring more often in the future. So we are talking about consequences or changes following the behavior. You have probably heard in meetings and discussions with your child's educational team on the use of reinforcers, reinforcement breaks, and first work, then break schedules. These schedules these strategies incorporate the principle of reinforcement and are used to increase functional and academic skills in addition to appropriate behaviors. There are two types of reinforcement, positive and negative. Both result in future increases in behavior. The only difference is if something is added, which would be positive, or taken away, which would be negative, after the behavior occurs. Let's look at some examples of positive and negative reinforcement. which will be presented by Alex, a lead behavior technician at Pathways.
In the first example, the child is given the instruction, write your name. This is the antecedent. The child then writes his or her name, which is the behavior. The teacher or parent then immediately provides attention with a praise statement, nice job. This is the consequence. As a result, the student continues to write their name when asked, and the teacher continues to provide attention in the form of praise. Attention in the form of praise could also be substituted for candy, high fives, or access to an electronic, whatever motivates the student enough to comply with the task. This is considered positive reinforcement because A, praise was added to the environment following the behavior, and B, that change resulted in an increase of that behavior. In example number 2, the child is given the instruction to pick up your toys, which is the antecedent. The child then picks up the toys, which is the behavior. Following this behavior, the child is immediately given a piece of candy. The candy is the consequence in this example. As a result of this scenario, the child continues to pick up their toys when asked, and this behavior continues to result in getting access to candy or other tangible items. This is considered positive reinforcement because A, candy was added to the environment following the behavior, and B, that change resulted in an increase of that behavior. When we look at example number 3, the antecedent is a bad smell in the kitchen. This smell leads you to the behavior of taking the trash outside. Following this behavior, the bad smell is gone or removed from the kitchen environment. Based on the consequence of the removal of the bad smell, you continue to take the trash outside when it smells. This is an example of negative reinforcement because A, the removal of the bad smell, and B, the removal increased the behavior of taking out the trash. Finally, in example number 4, when presented with difficult tasks, whether it be academic work, chores, etc., the child screams and cries. The difficult tasks are the antecedent, and the screaming and crying is the behavior. The consequence following this behavior is the removal of the difficult task. The child continues to scream and cry when presented with difficult tasks. This is another example of negative reinforcement because A, the difficult tasks were removed following the screaming and crying, and B, this resulted in future increases of screaming and crying behavior when difficult tasks are presented.
Punishment. Now that we have covered reinforcement, we can move on to punishment, another important principle of behavior change. Punishment occurs when a behavior is immediately followed by a change in the environment that results in similar behaviors occurring less often in the future. So punishment can be used to decrease behaviors. When you hear the word punishment, there are many things that might come to mind. However, a consequence is only considered punishment if we can show that it decreases future occurrences of the behavior. Similar to reinforcement, there are 2 types of punishment, positive and negative. Both result in future decreases in behavior. Positive punishment is when something is added to the environment to decrease behavior, and negative punishment is when something is taken away or removed. Now we will look at some examples of both positive and negative punishment.
In the first example, a child touches a hot stove, which is the behavior, and burns their finger. The onset of pain is the consequence. This results in the child not touching the hot stove in the future. This is considered positive punishment because A, the immediate addition of pain to the child's environment from burning their finger, and B, that change resulted in the child not continuing to touch the hot stove. Next, we have a child who hits their sibling, which is the behavior. Then the parent yells no, which is the consequence. As a result, the child does not hit their sibling anymore. This is another example of positive punishment because A, the parent yelling no is adding a reprimand to the environment, and B, this change results in a decrease of hitting behavior. In example number 3, a child hits their sibling, which is the behavior, and this is followed by the parent taking away their toy. Toy removal is the consequence. As a result, the child stops hitting their sibling. This example is showing negative punishment because A, the toy is being removed, and B, the removal, it decreases the child's hitting behaviors. Lastly, in example number 4, we have a student that is presented with work, which is the antecedent. The student throws their work materials, which is the behavior. The consequence for this behavior is the teacher removing a token. As a result, the student stops throwing materials. This is another negative punishment example because A, the removal of the token, and B, this resulted in a decrease of future instances of throwing materials.
Functions of behavior. Now that we have discussed the way in which behavior changes and the how, we are going to focus on the why. Why do our students, your children, engage in the behaviors they do? When we talk about functions of behavior, we are talking about the why, or in most cases, the hypothesized why. During meetings with your educational team, discussions on the functions of your child's behavior may at times be the main topic. Identifying the function and understanding why the behavior may be occurring in the environment allows us to develop treatment plans to decrease inappropriate behaviors and replace them with appropriate ones. It is important to understand that there is a purpose and reason that the student is engaging in any behavior. It is serving some need in that moment, or it has worked at gaining access to reinforcement in the past. So when we identify the function of that behavior, the goal is to teach them an alternative behavior or skill that is easier to do, socially acceptable, and will improve the quality of their life while serving the same need. The functions of behavior can be grouped into 4 main categories: to escape or avoid something, gain access to attention, gain access to an object, also referred to as tangible, and sensory, which is non-social. When we evaluate behavior in the environment, we are collecting data and information on the behavior, what happens immediately before the behavior, and what happens immediately following behavior. This information is then analyzed, and we can determine what the function or functions of the behavior are. In many situations, why the student engages in the behavior and continues to engage in the behavior can be explained with more than one function. Carla, a behavior technician at Pathways, will be discussing the functions of behaviors in detail in the following slides.
The first function of behavior we'll be talking about is attention. Behaviors that are maintained by attention are referred to as being socially mediated. In other words, individuals engage in behaviors to gain attention or reactions from others, such as parents, teachers, peers, and siblings. This attention can be positive or negative attention. For example, a child may engage in silly dance moves, cry, or make statements to gain attention from a parent. Another example may be an individual telling a joke to a friend to gain their attention. Individuals will also engage in behaviors to gain attention in the form of reprimands. For example, a child may make threatening statements, tease peers, or throw items to gain access to peers and adults' attention. The second function of behavior is escape. Behaviors that are maintained by escape occur when individuals are trying to avoid, delay, or stop something from happening in their environment. Some examples of situations in which we see escape behavior are when difficult tasks are presented, certain settings or places and people. This is also referred to as avoidance behaviors. A specific example of escape behavior would be a parent asks their child to eat vegetables and the child immediately runs away. Another example, the student's teacher tells them it is time for APE and the child immediately flops to the ground and refuses to walk to the gym. Another function of behavior is tangible. Behaviors that are maintained by access to tangible occur when individuals want something either directly in their environment or something they had access to previously. For example, a child's sibling is playing with a toy that he or she wants, so the child scratches the sibling to get the toy. Another example would be a child has a tantrum because they were given one cookie when they wanted two. Behaviors that occur to gain access to items may also look like a child bolting from their work area to the kitchen to get their favorite candy bar. Functional communication training is incorporated into most behavior intervention plans. and has been very effective at decreasing behaviors that are maintained by access to tangibles, access to attention, and escape.
The last function of behavior to discuss is automatic. Behaviors with this function are also referred to as sensory-seeking behaviors. When discussing these behaviors, you may have heard people describe them as stimming behaviors, behaviors that feel good, or behaviors that are not socially mediated. These behaviors occur and serve an internal need that is not always observable. Some examples of behaviors maintained by automatic reinforcement are hand flapping, repetitive movements and vocalizations, twirling objects, and jumping up and down, just to name a few. Forms of self-injury, such as skin picking, head banging, and rumination, are more severe and dangerous behaviors that can also be maintained by automatic reinforcement. These behaviors are more complex and difficult to treat because the occurrences may be attributed to underlying medical conditions, biological and neurological processes, which can make consequence strategies using reinforcement and punishment less effective. If the goal is to teach an alternative behavior, it is important to identify one that will provide the same or similar input that the individual is already receiving. For example, if a student enjoys jumping off of furniture because it provides specific sensory input, offering them a weighted vest to replace that behavior will probably not work because the vest cannot provide the same type of sensory input as jumping off of furniture. So to bring it all together, we reviewed the two ABA principles, reinforcement and punishment. These help to explain how behavior changes in the environment when learning takes place by either increasing or decreasing future occurrences of behavior. Functions tell us the why, and answering this question allows us to make informed treatment decisions, which leads to improvements in our students' behaviors. We invite you to complete our survey below. Your feedback on this training will help to inform future trainings and identify areas that are important to our families.